Hello, everybody. My name is Dr. Kathryn Garforth from Garforth Education, and today I have the pleasure of Melanie Brethour join me from Montreal, Canada. And today we're talking about the right to read inquiry and a teacher's path to structured literacy. So you may not know this, but on February 28th, the Ontario Human Rights Commission released their public inquiry into the right to read. And this right to read public inquiry looked at several things related to reading instruction in Ontario. But the findings and the recommendations from this report have a wider impact. And we're trying to make sure that this report isn't forgotten and we make forward progress for our students. So before we chat with Melanie, I just want to share a couple of the recommendations that I think are important to discuss before we get started, because they do have to do with some of the things we're talking about in this talk today. And so the first thing is that the ministry should provide stable envelopes yearly funding to all school boards in the province to hire literacy learning leads to coordinate and support board level improvement efforts relating to reading and literacy. The ministry should require that literacy learning leads be trained in the science of reading, including systematic and direct instruction in foundational reading skills and structured literacy approaches. Recommendation number 46 says that school boards should draw on internal expertise, educators, administrators, speech language pathologists, and psychology staff who are knowledgeable about the science of reading for systematic and direct instruction in foundational reading skills and structured literacy approaches. And the final one, and I think this is one of the really important ones, especially for today's conversation, is that board staff who advocate for the science of reading or other measures to improve outcomes for students with disabilities should never be subject to adverse consequences and reprisals. So I am very happy that Melanie has agreed to talk to me today, because this is a journey that a lot of teachers are having to do and strike out on their own to do, given how current curriculums are designed and the teacher education programs and what they're being trained in. Yes, we can make changes for the new teachers that are coming into the profession, but we have to remember about all of our current teachers that need to go on this path. So thank you for joining me, Melanie. You are in Montreal and you're a resource teacher. And your journey all really started when one of your your child had severe dyslexia, right?
Yes, that's exactly it. And I'm very happy to be here today to speak to you as well. I have been teaching for 17 years. I've been in pretty much special ed for most of my career. I've taught some special programs, and I always felt I knew enough about dyslexia and how to teach students how to read, more of a balanced literacy approach for sure at the beginning of my career. And when my son, I always knew he was struggling in kindergarten. Unfortunately, in Quebec, and I think there's other provinces, they often say you need to wait till the end of grade 2 or grade 3 to get a diagnosis, and that's all a whole other ball game, but I won't bring that up too much today. But so I always knew I was pretty much sure he was dyslexic. I'm a teacher, I understood that. But then we finally got the official diagnosis, and he was almost turning 9 at the time and had a few other inattentive ADD, mild language disorder, and dysgraphia as well. And that's when I said, you know what, I'm going to watch, as many webinars as I can about dyslexia. And I watched one that kind of like an aha moment for me, in a sense that I don't think I ever knew really what they needed. Students, whether they have a diagnosis or they're at risk for dyslexia, or just any student who's struggling. And that was when I learned about evidence-based intervention. I learned about OG, Orton-Gilliam, structured literacy. And I kind of went on a obsessive path to learn everything that I can about dyslexia and then the science of reading and structured literacy. And it's been I like to call it my journey, my dyslexia journey. I'm not dyslexic, but my son is severely dyslexic. And when I say severe, he's reading many levels below his grade level that he's supposed to be at. So, and despite everything that I have done over the years to help him, it wasn't evidence-based interventions, unfortunately. So I have a lot of mom guilt. I have a lot of teacher guilt. And my saying, I think I mentioned that to you the other day, is, you do better. When you know better, you do better. And that's how I kind of live with myself in terms of that. But I'm very excited to be here. I am in like a dyslexia little community and science of reading community. So it seems that a lot of people know about it, but it's just in that community. When I speak to my colleagues, they really didn't know a lot about any of this, and I didn't either. So I actually saw Kate Wynn yesterday on, I think it was the morning show, and she talked about, oh yes, and she was talking about like myths about reading, and it was just like, this is, and I think one of the things she said is, be nice to your child's teacher because they may not know. And I think this is such a powerful report and inquiry, because I do think it's going to have change, not only in Ontario, but in, BC and Montreal. And I think it's a fantastic report, and I'm really hoping for change.
And that's the thing. I mean, I know that my teacher education program, we've seen, reports and reviews of teachers education programs really across the globe that aren't including these major components of how the brain learns to read and how we need to make sure that our instruction addresses every student in the class and not those 30 or 40% that are going to learn to read regardless of how we teach. I've spoken to many teachers and parents over the years about this, and know that it's that, that one student that made them look further, or their child, right? And they're like, okay, well, I'm a teacher, I should know how to do this, but what I've been trained to do isn't working. And it's really important that we acknowledge that it's not that the teachers are intentionally trying to make it hard for their students. They just have not been provided with the training that looks at the research. I was watching a video earlier this morning of Dr. Decoding talking about reading and the brain. And there was a quote that really struck with me that he said at the beginning of the presentation. And he was saying that teachers know more about the workings of their car than they do about how children's brains work when it comes to reading. And if you think about it, that's very true, right? We learn in the teacher education programs, I know mine specifically, it was all about what to do once the students knew how to read. And there has to be physical changes made in the brain to make it so students become fluent, skilled readers and are able to read to learn instead of just that learning to read phase. And it's important that teachers understand the processes to get there. So, your path, you said, started out when you're like, okay, well, I can't help my son. What do I do next? And so many people are in this situation. And this is how a lot of those schools specializing in dyslexia started. It was moms saying, look, this isn't okay. So they get Orton Gillingham training. And then they realize, what, it's easier to work with someone else's kid than my own child. Right? And there isn't that parent-child conflict. So they swapped, and then they created schools. But not everybody has the luxury to that. And learning to read is a basic human right that's recognized by the United Nations. So we need to make sure that we're giving our teachers the knowledge to do more. So what, in your experience, is the best first way to start?
Well, I went to New Orleans a few weeks ago for the Plain Talk Literacy, and it was amazing. So I heard, amazing presenters. And one of them was saying, how do you get your colleagues on board? I think this has to come from higher up in the sense of school board and faculties of education. But it's really, it's hard for change. It's been very demanding to teach the last 2 years with the pandemic as well. We have a lot on our plates, and asking teachers to, take more PD and it's challenging, right? We know that change is hard too, but when we have evidence to say that it's not working, we definitely need to change. But they said that the best thing is to, do it in your classrooms, you seeing it work, you get others to talk about. And I know that's happening at my school, sharing, I'm trying this, I'm doing that. And other teachers are kind of interested. We're great at sharing things for sure. If you look on, there's amazing websites and, teacher, I wouldn't say teacher pay teacher in the sense that we want evidence-based interventions and appropriate resources, but there are some fantastic ones for sure. And I think just sharing our knowledge, I'm actually presenting on Friday to all my resource teachers at my school board about structured literacy. I am going to bring up the right to read as well. I think it's a perfect time to bring it up, and hopefully, they'll go back to their schools, and we always share what we learned at the resource meetings with our schools. And I think, having discussions like this today and just getting people on board is what we need to do.
Yeah. And, it really brings change. And when, it may take a year or two for people to catch on what you're doing, but you have your students for a year if you're a classroom teacher, and maybe two if you have combined grades. But when your students move on to that next teacher and they're like, oh, wow, all your kids, or so many of your kids are, doing that much better. What did you do? And then when you're in a situation as a resource teacher or a learning support teacher where you're providing that parachute support in, and the teachers are recognizing, wow, what you're doing is really making a difference, and asking and sharing knowledge. I mean, that's the thing. And I remember, teaching can be such an isolating thing, right? You have your
It can be, yes.
And everything, and it, trying to keep up with all your lessons and your reporting, and then still taking that time to be social and involved. I mean, at least social media takes it to that one next level, but it's important that we help support each other on this path. And even just looking at what's behind you, what are some of the great resources that you're using?
Well, that's the thing. When I say I became obsessive, I watched, I can't tell you how many professional development webinars, anything. I went to the Plain Talk in New Orleans. That was just fantastic. And I transformed my room into, a structured literacy, evidence-based interventions. I was one of those parents that took OG as well. And I'm doing my practicum right now. So a lot of what I do is, an OG based lesson, but it is based on structured literacy. So I have my vowel valley. They're saying, to move from, word walls to sound walls. And there's some amazing, tools for reading. Has one that I would love to get, but it's a little pricey. And I'm going to try and make a wish list for my principal that she'll be able to. And I have Scarborough's rope in the background as well. And I actually did it more for a conversation when teachers come into my room, because I can definitely use it for, a tool for my students. But that was really why I was hoping to, teachers come into my room, ask me for things, resources and stuff like that. So I was hoping conversation. It has been happening. And I have one on my other wall. It says, stuck on a word, don't guess. And so it's just really, getting decodables this year. I think I got them last year. I asked my principals. So principals are fantastic in the sense that if you ask them and they have the money, they will buy what you need. And I think that was one of the points in the right to read, is saying that, we have a lot on our plates and pulling, resources from here and there. But if we're given the money and the the right resources to use in our classroom, it can be very effective.
Exactly. And, teachers shouldn't have to be spending their own money on these essential tools and training. And the time to get it, like the amount of time that, you've talked about that you've invested, you're very fortunate to have that available to you and being at a position in your career where you can. Thinking about the new teachers that are just out of school that are scrambling and they're realizing that maybe they didn't get everything that they needed out of their education program or their PDP because they don't have these foundational concepts. And I know, the two that I think are the best way to start is understanding the simple view of reading. And that's that reading comprehension can be broken into two sub-skills, right? The word recognition or the decoding, and then the language comprehension. So when we're looking at our students, we need to figure out what part or both of them are causing the problems in the situation. And then we have Scarborough's reading rope, which you got so nicely displayed behind you. And I love the starry background behind it because it's like, whoa, it really does expand your universe as a teacher to understand how much really goes into that reading comprehension that you may not have thought about before, right?
Yes, definitely. And I think everybody thinks, oh, the simple view of reading, it's reading simple. It's not. It's complex, but it's so simple to understand, as you were just saying. If you don't have those two pieces, you can't understand what you're reading. So
yeah, and then you look, deeper into Scarborough's reading rope, and you can do assessments and screening that help you understand that. And that's another thing that I think we really need to highlight in this transition from where we are to where we need to be, is understanding screening and how screening isn't just to have marks on your spreadsheet,
mm-hmm.
to actually inform your instruction.
Yes, definitely. And I try and do that every year, at least 3 times a year with my students. And not to say like we need to get a diagnosis of whether it's dyslexia, it's just to say these students are having difficulty and we need to do the interventions early on. As a parent, I cannot tell other parents like that message loud and clear, in the sense like they need intervention regardless, and the wait to fail model, and let's see how they are. They're a summer baby and all that.
Baby. Yeah, they're going to catch up. It's perfectly normal to learn how to read in grade 3. And the thing is, from the research, we know that we can detect these weaknesses very early on, even in preschool. And we know that critical time for intervention is the K1-2. And how our current system is set up, a lot of kids aren't even being looked at in further detail.
No, exactly. And it's true.
And we need to make the shift to saying, okay, let's just do class-wide screening and see where these kids are at and realize all these strands fit together. So yes, because they're high in this area, but low in this area, let's use that resource time or collaborative teaching and have it so we can do that small group instruction where we're focusing on the more intensive training in phonemic awareness or phonological awareness that some students just really need that extra support to get.
Yes.
And then talking about the vowel valley, do you want to just run us through that? You've got it behind you. Is there any way that you can just shift your screen a bit to?
Yeah, and I only have that right now. My goal is to have like a sound wall on, but I just thought I'd do the vowel valley. And that was something that I really never explicitly taught my students. It would be, I'd show the card or not even, and just say, this is the sound, the k sound. Yeah. And that's it, pretty much. Let's practice, whereas now we really, and so many students get mixed up with their short vowels. So I'm not sure entirely if the mouths are accurate. That's my only issue with this one. But I use mirrors now in my classroom. Well, with COVID, it's been a little bit more tricky with the masks. I don't know in other provinces, but here in Quebec, we had to wear masks in the classroom. We tried plexiglass, just staying 2 meters away, and I would pull down my mask to show the articulation gestures. And then is it voiced on, voiced off? Is your mouth, are you smiling? So it's just to really show students who are having difficulty with their sounds that, these are the ways that you can, your mouth is going to look like. And that, when you're saying the vowels, all vowels are voiced on. And so I use it all often with my students, and just to show that there's so many, there's many different ways to represent the sound, right, with our graphemes. And
of course. And the other thing that I like to highlight to teachers is really understanding these, and the voiced and the voiceless sounds really helps you when it comes to spelling errors.
Yes.
Because there are so many times they're like, oh, why are they using a G? It's a C or it's a K. Well, it's because the only difference is the voiced and the voiceless, right? And for some sounds, it doesn't matter, like, and the voiced and the voiceless are both represented by the TH grapheme. But other sounds in the English language, voiced and voiceless makes a difference for the letter that represents them. And when we're looking at students that have English as an additional language, we need to ask ourselves, are these phonemes that even are part of their first language and their home language? So are they sensitive to these sounds? And do they come from a tonal language, right? Where there's all these hints that, yes, at the beginning of your journey into understanding things, you're not going to be diving headfirst into this. It's that slow transition of your knowledge and accumulation of understanding how much we actually do know about. Sorry, my kittens are distracting the house. He's right there. Give me a second to refocus.
No problem.
Okay, right. So when we are at the beginning of our journey, we just want to get those basics understandings, and you're going to see as you make that transition that it just takes your knowledge that much further. And as you get a little bit more each time, it just goes, oh, well, that makes sense. And oh, that makes sense. And it's allowing yourself to be like, okay, I don't know everything. And there's always room to learn more. So being a teacher, we have to acknowledge that we've chosen a profession that requires lifelong learning and continual professional development. And the things that we know today about reading are just the beginning. And especially with all the different imaging studies that are available and the time and money that's put into it, recognize that if you went to every professional development they have today, 2 years, it's going to be a little bit different, and realize that is a changing field, and what we know now is just the baseline for us to move further. And yes, it can seem intimidating, and you maybe have that idea of the one-room schoolhouse and teaching one thing to all your students and everybody getting it the first time you teach it, kind of accepting that that's not reality. And knowing that you have to go further. So can we talk a little bit about what it was like to go on that journey? It seems like it was like just you doing it on your own and not a group of teachers at your school. So were you talking about this with your colleagues, or was it something that you were kind of keeping to yourself?
No, I'm definitely talking about it with my colleagues. I'm one of, there's a resource teacher, another resource teacher myself, and I provide support for grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, and grade 4. And I'm one to share ideas. As I said, a lot of teachers I know that are, it's been a tiring 2 years and all that, but I did it mainly because of my son. As I said, it was to help him, but at the same time, obviously it has, it goes into my lessons now completely. I've changed everything of how I did resource before. I was more of a guided reading kind of model. And I had many books on that, like not the science of reading piece. And I changed everything that I have. And it can be overwhelming. I think for me, it was, okay, it's for my son. I'm going to, learn everything that I can. And I did it on my own time. But as time went on, I don't know, it may be different in other school boards, provinces, but my school does give money to do professional development. The only thing is I never heard about this before. So I think if teachers start hearing about it, they have the resources, at least I know here at my school board, to take professional development. You're released, you don't have to pay out of pocket, but I didn't know any of this. I didn't know that, the science of reading existed before my son. So, and a lot of people I talk to still don't know. And I think just getting the message out, as I was saying before, with the right to read and spreading awareness about the science of reading is just incredible. So it's been a journey for sure. Sometimes overwhelming, sometimes too many tabs. And, but I think you said it before, if you focus maybe not on everything all at once and just, trying something out with your groups. And there's so many wonderful resources, as I said, online that's free. Like, if you're changing from, memorizing words to a new way that many of people are calling heart words, just simple things like that. Like, you don't have to, I saw a quote like, change everything in one day, but change takes time and you want to be an expertise at what you're doing too. So I think just honing in on something and working on it for a few weeks and seeing how your students are doing, and then trying maybe to adopt another piece of what structured literacy elements have.
Yeah, and I've read things where it's saying, the transition can take 5 years for it to really go from having a balanced literacy classroom and approach to teaching to that structured literacy, science of reading, whatever you want to call it, method, and allowing yourself that time and realizing you only have 24 hours a day and you have competing demands, and it's very tempting to go on and buy all of the books, but then you have the guilt of the stack of books sitting on your bookshelf or on your bedside table saying, oh, I really need to read that. Just focus on one thing and understand that there's a lot of information out there. Like, even if you're just looking at phonological awareness, well, there are 44 phonemes in the English language. Most people can't name them, and that's okay. You don't have to have them all memorized and understand the international alphabet, so the sounds and symbols, but just take it one step at a time and get comfortable with it instead of trying to do everything all at once. There are great resources available. I am working on the Right to Read Initiative website. It's readinitiative.com, and this is going to be a resource that you can refer to see some of these various professional developments available, that you can get them, and you don't have to spend a lot of time and a lot of money. But as you just mentioned, that there are resources available, and the worst thing that can happen when you ask is them saying no.
Exactly.
And it's getting comfortable with hearing the word no, being okay with it, and taking the opportunity to, sorry, my phone just went off. Taking the opportunity to ask around, see what other friends have, right? What other colleagues have, what resources are available. And depending on the school that you're at, the PAC may be able to help to provide funds depending on the funds within the PAC at your school or the DPAC, the district PAC, because they want to help the teachers and do everything they can to help the teachers get the resources they need and the professional development that they need. They realize that it's not just their child, and that's why they raise these funds.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Yeah. So before we go, any advice that you have for a teacher just beginning this journey?
Well, I think regardless of you just got out of your university program, or you're a teacher like me, 17 years in, or you're a teacher who's, has a few years left, it's never too late to learn. And like you said, it's so important. I think I posted something the other day of like, if you went to your doctor and they said, I don't know what the latest is in the science, but there's a 40% chance that it'll be successful. And you would be probably like very upset, right? And I think that's what we need to understand, that this is how our brains learn to read, and there's science to back it up. And when I went to that workshop, I forget who said it, but they said there is no reading wars, because if you look at the science, there shouldn't be. Yeah. And I just think there, if you don't know, I didn't know many of the things that I know now. It's just, I didn't know a few years ago, and I need to let that go and just move forward. And it's never too late to learn. So that's.
When you don't know what you don't know. And also remember, a lot of the big names out there admit that when they started teaching and started on this journey, they didn't know either, right? So if you look at teacher or individuals like Louisa Moats, who is one of the co-authors of the Letters program and has great professional development out there, and she's one of the top people. She was part of the National Rereading Panel's report. She has admitted several times, or said, not even admitted, not shaming. She's like, look, I didn't know this when I started. And there was that one person that made the difference, right? That, I wanted to look further and get more. So if you're just beginning that journey, know that you're not alone, and there are people out there who want to help you. There is the Right to Read Initiative Facebook group and other ones out there, and it's about helping others along the way and not being afraid to ask for help. So I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'm so happy that you're on this journey and you're in a position where you're able to help share with others within your district.
Yes, yeah, I'm looking forward. I'll let you know how Friday goes. My first presentation with my colleagues, and I'm very excited. And I think slowly and surely the message will get out there. But I'm so excited about the Right to Read, because I do think it's going to have a huge impact on other provinces.
Well, and it's not just Canada.
No.
The recommendations are valid, and it's not just English. They're valid for French. Tomorrow I have Kim Lockhart coming on, and we're discussing how, yes, the recommendations are for English, but when we look at the science of reading, this philosophy and the way that the brain learns how to read isn't language dependent, right? So when we look at Spanish, when we look at French, when we look at other alphabetic languages, the same areas of the brain are used and the same foundational skills are needed. It's just the level of transparency in the language. So it's easier to learn Spanish because there's more of that one-to-one correspondence between the phonemes, or the sounds of the language, and the letters, or the graphemes that represent them. And with English being a very orthographically deep language, we need to recognize that it's going to take a while for us as teachers and educators to gain the knowledge and having the comfort with it so we can use it in our classroom. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope you can join on other conversations.
Great, thank you very much.